we started to see a rise in on-campus incidences. There were a couple of school shootings. There were a couple of stabbings that were taking place. So now parents were pushing back on this decision, and they wanted the cops back on campus. And the school board said, no, we're not going back. Okay. So the idea behind having police officers on school campuses really came out of a whole sense of safety. And then it just kind of like went on steroids right after Columbine. We just started putting more cops in schools, more cops in schools, more cops in schools. Okay? You can see the numbers there. As of 2020, there's over 23,400 police officers on school campus. Close to 50, according to the Department of Education, close to 50% of all schools in this nation have at least one police officer assigned to that campus. Interested in a topic for your paper that's due on Saturday? This might be kind of interesting topic to kind of delve into. Or you may want to look at this whole school to prison pipeline. If you haven't heard of this, they just rated, yes, yeah, he's pretty much done. The superintendent's done, Victor. Yeah. But anyway, side note. So there's this idea of this school to prison pipeline, okay, and which, in a nutshell, says the more cops you have on campus, the higher the likelihood that these kids are going to get involved in the juvenile justice system for some very, very minor offenses. To some degree, that's true. That actually did happen, right? Kids would often get truancy tickets coming in 10 minutes after the bell rang, right? Or they'd be walking to school and then they would get picked up by the police because, they were walking to school, but maybe they left the house late or something. After the school bell rang, they'd be picked up for curfew violations or, truancy kind of things, right? And so they'd be given a ticket. They'd have to go to traffic court to get that resolved. Many of them didn't go. It turns into a warrant. Here we go, right? So a lot of these kids were being brought into the juvenile justice system for some very, very minor dumb stuff that kids do. And then what do we know about the juvenile justice system? The earlier you get in, the longer you're going to be in it. And then eventually you're going to transition into the adult criminal justice system. Okay, this was going on for years and years and years. So then we came up with this idea that, there's a school to prison pipeline that was happening. Okay? And that was because the the school campus police officer was becoming more involved in school discipline. And so it was easy. Again, I love teachers. They have a hard job. And so, you have a classroom of 30 kids and you have two knuckleheads in class, and they don't want to settle down so you can teach the whole class. You call somebody to come take care of them. And a lot of times a police officer would come and resolve that, right? So Christian went to East Valley High School. It's a nice high school.
Yeah, basically, in my high school, when I was around in my freshman year, they used to be having school police there. I remember back in my junior or senior year, they had like actual police officers who usually like check in with students who may have like some items like drugs or marijuana. I don't know, but they were there. I remember very well.
Yeah, they're not anymore. So, and that 2020 decision really changed the whole face of having cops on school campuses. Yeah. So having school police officers involved in that school discipline, that was one aspect of it. And then the second part of it is when these schools develop these zero tolerance policies. And you couldn't bring anything that resembled any kind of weapon, nothing, zero tolerance, right? Couldn't bring any kind of drugs or even medication on campus. It had to be given to the school nurse by your parents. There had to be some instructions on how to. You can't bring aspirin. You couldn't bring Tylenol because you were going to share with other students. Stupid shit. I mean, it really was stupid. And these zero tolerance policies got a lot of kids expelled, suspended, arrested. It was just, it was overboard. It went overboard. It really did go overboard. Okay. Here's the but, because there's always a but. There is some evidence that schools with school resource officers, they call them SROs, the school resource officers, have been able to reduce assaults and weapon possessions. So, in that regard, yes, there's a contribution to school safety. I'm all for that. Anything that we can do to, reduce kids bringing weapons on campus, I like that, obviously, right? There is some evidence that having a school police officer on campus does contribute to school safety. So I don't want to negate that. I want to acknowledge that there is true. And then again, there's a link there if you really want to delve into this a little bit more. However, holistically, if you look at this from the entire piece of the pie, having school officers on campus has actually hurt more students than it's helped students. Just in the sense of that school to prison pipeline aspect. Okay. Juvenile court. Briefly. In most jurisdictions, after a kid gets arrested, right, they go into the juvenile court system. So in most jurisdictions, including California, by the way, it's broken down into two separate divisions. One is the delinquency cases. That's the juvenile justice system, right? The delinquency cases, kids that commit crime. And under that also would be status offenses, by the way, okay? Although they're not crimes, as I mentioned. But they're included in the juvenile justice system. Delinquency cases. And then number two, those are the dependency cases. Foster care, number two. Child abuse, neglect, those kind of things, number two. The dependency cases, or the dependency court, is the system that handles kids who are removed from their parents' custody because they're being neglected or abused. So in essence, if you remember, those kids are dependent on our care. So it's dependency court. Okay? So it's delinquency and dependency. Okay? How many cases are referred to the juvenile court by law enforcement? Well, high into the 80s. In 2010, it was 83% of all delinquency cases came by law enforcement. So law enforcement referred, they arrested the kid, issued them a ticket, sent it to you. So it all came from the police. And the remaining balance would be parents, schools, social service agencies, but it's very low. In 2016, it went down to 82%, still in the range. 2022, it was about 87%. But by and large, the vast majority of cases that come into the juvenile court are brought in by the police. Okay. So this is going to really call into question this types of encounters between these two actors, the police and the juvenile. Okay, most of the time, what you're going to find is when the police make contact with the juvenile or juveniles, when the police make contact with the juveniles, it tends to be very informal. There's an informal nature to many of the police and juvenile encounters. Okay, meaning that there's no arrest, there's no detention. Police officers are making contact with them because of maybe they got a phone call, or you need help with something. Why aren't you in school? It's 2 a.m. Why are you on? That kind of. And it's informal. It's an informal nature. Okay, so when you're looking at stats, especially the ones that I showed you earlier today, because they did come from the FBI. The FBI, or the UCR, the FBI really it fails to disclose the complete incidences of all juvenile contacts with police because of the informal nature of many of the contacts between police and juvenile. The vast majority of those are never recorded anywhere except within the police department. Because many times it doesn't even end with an arrest. So there's no need to record. Right? Very informal. So when you look at, if you're trying to understand the attitudes of these young people towards the police, obviously there's two avenues you can go, where the less favorable attitudes towards the police tend to be from older juveniles, African American males, and from the lower socioeconomic status. And again, I always have to go back to that topic about the initial contact with police and how that sets up for future encounters with the police, right? Those that tend to have favorable attitudes are the younger children, Caucasians, girls, and those from middle and upper socioeconomic statuses. Okay. Give you some ideas. Okay. Oh, I want to show you this before we leave.
I don't know, I actually like it. I don't want to work in the other division. I like, working in this area.
DeAndre was on the run. He had got into a domestic dispute with his child's mother. She knew he was on the run. She still called the police on him, not taking anything or saying anything negative about her. So he fled to a house that was down the street. So he gets into a standoff for, I would say, about 15, 20.
We can't see, it's just a black screen.
Oh, you know what? Maybe because it's from my Amazon Prime. Okay. Well, then I can't show it to you then, unfortunately. All right. I'll see if I can figure it out, and I'll show it to you on Wednesday when we come back. But it may be just because it's from Amazon Prime. They don't let me show it to you. Okay. I'll see. I'll try to figure it out and see if I can bring it to you on. But if you have Amazon Prime, it's called Catching Hell in the City of Los Angeles. I'm sorry, that's not right. Catching Hell in the City of Angels. Catching Hell in the City of Angels. If you want to take a look at that. The scene that I was going to show you, again, very graphic. It does show a shooting of a young person. But I'll see if I can figure that out for you. All right. Any questions before we leave? All right. I'll see you all on Wednesday. Have a good rest of your day and enjoy this weather.
Thank you, Professor. sir. Have a good one.